Okay, it's setting up for meeting.
Okay.
I will let you know.
All right. It will tell us when we are, right?
Okay, I think we're on. This is so new to me. Hi everybody, my name is Hillary Doherty. I'm with Women's March Broward. This is our very first Zoom conversations with candidates, so I'm super excited about it. This is episode 60 of Conversations with Candidates, which is just absolutely amazing to me since we started doing this in 2017, leading up to 2018 election. We are really excited tonight to be joined by Dr. Jeff Holness, who is running for Broward County School Board seat 9, which is an at-large seat, which is super interesting and exciting. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to run for office.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Hillary. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on here live on Zoom through Facebook. I know it would be much better in person, but this is the next best option. So I am truly enjoying this. We also had our forum last night on Zoom, so that's wonderful. I'd like to thank the viewers for taking the time out to tune in to listen to the interview. And I must say that, Hillary, you always do such a good job letting all of us feel so comfortable and so at ease when you interview us. So we thank you.
Thank you.
Before I introduce myself, I'd just like to express my sincere and deepest condolences to the family of State Rep Christine Jacobs. She was such a strong leader for Broward and has done so much for our county. So I would be remiss if I did not mention that, and I do appreciate everything she has done in Broward County, as all of us do. Now, in terms of, I just introduced myself. I am Jeff Holness, candidate for Broward County Schools at Large, seat 9. My website is jeffholness.com. Now, I am a father. I have 2 sons, Matthew and Jordan. Matthew attends Heron Heights Elementary in Parkland, and Jordan attends West Glades Middle School in Parkland as well. Now, as you can see, both of them attend Broward County Public Schools. I myself is a graduate of university and colleges in Broward County. I attended initially Broward College. I did an Associate of Arts there. And then I went on to Florida Atlantic University, did my undergrad. And then I went on to Nova Southeastern University, where I completed a master's in curriculum design and a doctor of education at Nova Southeastern. Also, Hillary, I attended high school right here in Broward. I am a graduate of Dillard High School. That was in 1988. And I've been a teacher. I've been a teacher in Broward County for about 17 years for Broward County schools. I would consider myself an educator for over 20 years. I currently run a learning center called Kumon Math and Reading. I don't know if you've heard of that, Hillary.
I have, yeah.
We're pretty much all over the county and the country. So that's what I've done in the last 5 years. I'm very successful at it. I am one of the top 3 centers in South Florida, including Palm Beach. Now, the school board will have a huge void, because Robin Bottleman, as everyone knows, is running for state rep. So there's going to be this open seat. And when you look at what's happening today, our children are really living in times of uncertainty. So much ambiguity exists right now, and so much anxiety and concern. And I believe that it is really important at this time that we elect someone with the right experience and the right knowledge, and also someone with the right attitude to foster that environment of unity, of cooperation, of collaboration, so we can move our district forward and we can create a brighter future for our children. So that's pretty much why I'm running. And I'd like to also mention, Hillary, that I came here as an immigrant. I came here when I was a child. I was born in Jamaica. And I remember when I attended school in Jamaica, and I think this is where I can remember my community service inherent behavior started, because when I was going to high school, I remember my parents were middle class. I grew up on a farm in the country, And I remember children when I went to school did not have the ability to buy lunch because their parents were poor.
Mm.
And unknowing to my parents, I used to use my taxi fare and my lunch money and try to buy lunch for all my friends. As a result, I had to hitchhike home many times.
Wow.
Did not tell my parents because in the Caribbean you do get paddle, and so. But I've done that many times, and I think from then I realized the impact that economic conditions can have on a child's learning. And I think I have that same childhood attitude toward helping people, and I'd like to bring that to the school board.
Oh, that's amazing. My gosh, you had a full life so far. I didn't realize you started Kumon. So that's your
Well,
company?
well, I didn't start Kumon. I opened a Kumon Center. It's actually
Okay.
a franchise. So
Yeah.
Kumon has about 1,600 or so Kumon centers in the United States. It's a franchise, and I own the one in Coral Springs.
Okay.
And that particular center in the 5 years has become one of the top centers in student growth and student learning outcome for Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade County under my
Yeah.
leadership.
Those are wonderful facilities. They're awesome.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk. Like you said, you've been an educator for 17 years. Let's talk a little bit about how we can actually improve Broward County schools. So let's say you're elected. What are the first 3 things that are like the most important for you as a school board member?
Right. Well, I would say the top 3 areas of concern for me, and let me just say this, Hillary, we have done an amazing job over the last couple of years to address the issue of safety and security with what has happened to our students in Parkland. As you know, my 2 sons also go to schools in Parkland, still going to schools in Parkland.
Mhm.
And I remember when the incident happened, I was actually out of the country and my sons were in school. And for about an hour and a half, I did not know what happened to them. I did not know who it was. I did not know if it was Heron Heights. I just heard there was a shooting incident in Parkland. So I was trying to make phone calls to try to determine what has happened and if my own kids were safe.
Mhm.
So I would say that, besides school safety and security, and we have done a lot, and I will continue to contribute to what we have done, there are other areas that are top priorities for me. And I would say number one, on day one when I go into office as a school board member, is to work on allocating more attention and resources to mental health. Because I believe that what has happened in a lot of these schools, when you look at Parkland, when you look at in Texas with, I believe that there's the kid Adam, and then you have Jeffrey Wise and these kids that really commit these mass shootings. A lot of them end up killing themselves in the process. And when you look at their history and their background, it has a lot to do with mental instability and mental health issues. So I want to focus on how we address mental health in our children. And I think we should fund that area a lot more. I know we had the Next Generation referendum, and part of that, which is about 8% of that money, was used to fund mental health resources such as guidance counselors, social workers. But I think we need to even fund that area a lot more and to work collaboratively with our agencies, our communities, work together to see how we can continue to identify and address mental health issues in our children. Now, the second area that I would focus on is ESC students, students with learning disabilities. I think it's an area that we need to spend a lot more attention on. It's sometimes an area that gets sort of pushed to the side. I want to focus on our kids in the classrooms and how we actually implement the accommodations that are in their individual education plans. Now, every child identified as an ESE child will have what's called an IEP. And I think the district has done a wonderful job and the schools have done a wonderful job writing and putting together these documentation. But putting something together and implementing it properly is a whole different thing, right? So I want to make sure that we're not just dotting our I's and crossing our T's, but we're actually doing what's in those documents. And We're getting parents involved, actively involved in writing these IEPs and working together to make sure we're implementing them properly at the classroom level. So that's number two. Number three is, I think we need to do a lot more for our teachers and our ESP. Our teachers are not properly compensated, and we all know that. Now, the budget that the school board has, it's very limited because it's determined by Tallahassee how much money we get as far as funding education in the state of Florida. And by the way, the state of Florida is ranked 46 in the nation, 46 in the nation in how it fund in terms of teachers' pay. And we're 46 in the nation. And Hillary, we also ranked 41 in the nation in how we fund our students. So you think about that, we're not paying our teachers properly. We're not allocating the right amount of money for our children. So what kind of outcome are we going to have? We're going to have teachers who can't pay their bills, so they're going to have to overwork. They're going to have to do a second job, and then they're going to have to come into a classroom exhausted to help our children. In addition to that, we don't have near enough resources to provide for our children because of the funding we get per student. So I think we need to, many people tend to give up on Tallahassee, that they're not going to do anything for us. We shouldn't try to advocate for more money from Tallahassee because we feel like our hands are tied. There's nothing can be done. But I don't believe that. I think that if we have a strong collective approach, and this shouldn't be a partisan issue. We have kids who are Republicans, kids who are independent, kids who are Democrats, who are suffering. So I think we need to be able to cross party lines and try to get something done in Tallahassee. So the state of Florida is not number 46 in the nation in how it pays its teachers and number 41 in how it funds our students. I mean, look, when you look at how education is funded in Florida, there are two different pots, right? It's funded by sales tax, which goes into the Florida Education Finance Program. And it's also funded by what they call RLE, required local effort millage, right? Which is a millage rate set on our properties so it can fund schools throughout the state.
Right.
I think we need to look at how we can, how the state can provide more of that money to fund education, or even increase some of that. For example, if we add a small percentage to our sales tax and fund education, we could make a huge impact. If we add a small increase to the RLE, the millage, it could fund our teachers and fund our mental health issues that we're trying to address. So I think something can be done, but we have to work in a nonpartisan way.
It's always a tough one. I mean, every time there's an election, they like to talk to teachers. They want to talk about how important education is, but it never seems to really to change, and I don't understand why. And I remember reading something at least a year ago that was companies weren't coming here to put their businesses here because of how poorly we think about education. Why would they bring a business here when we don't educate workers even? Like, these are people who are going to be going into their buildings to work in their businesses. Why would they bring it here when we even educate our children?
I mean, think about
I don't want to say we're not educating. I mean, we don't value it. We're showing that we don't value it.
Right, and it's a state issue. It starts with the state. And if you look at, for example, you have some wonderful communities, right? But the schools are not properly funded. So if our schools are not properly funded, our children are not performing, it's going to affect other things. It's going to affect our property values. It's going to affect our quality of life. It's going to affect the companies that come in. It's going to affect our jobs. All these things get affected. So I think we're all on the same page to increase funding. I don't think any resident of this state has a problem in paying just a little bit more so we can provide a higher quality education for our students and higher compensation for our teachers. I just think we need to be able to collectively, in a nonpartisan way, advocate in Tallahassee, all over the state, to be able to fund education better. There's no way that we should be almost at the bottom. I think there are only few states below us, like Idaho. Florida is a progressive, strong state with a huge student population. We have Broward County is the sixth largest school district in the nation, the second in the state of Florida.
Hmm.
We need to be able to fund this properly.
Right. You can't complain about things if you're not willing to spend money on it, right? It's like you would hope people would want to pay a little bit more for education. I mean,
Exactly. And I want to just make one more comment. Now, with the current money that we're working with in our budget, which is our budget is about $4 billion for Broward County, right? For the school district. With the budget that we're working with, yes, we do need to, and I know the teachers union and other sources are advocating for that as well. We do need to look into how we spend the money we have, in addition to trying to get more money from the state, right?
yeah, yeah.
When you look at locally, how do we spend the money that we have? What are the areas that we need to really focus on? And I think that's what our teachers are asking about. You know, when you do the budget, how can you make sure the budget is going to provide for the teachers in the best way possible? Although teachers and all of us acknowledge that it doesn't matter what we do with the current budget, it will never be enough to pay our teachers because our teachers deserve a lot more. But how can we make sure we do the best we can?
Right.
And so, right. So when you look at our $4 billion budget, the general fund part of it, which is about 2.6 billion, is what we use to pay for our teachers and their compensation, right? The other part is for capital projects, which is about 1.3 billion. So I think when we're looking for our teachers and looking in the interest of our teachers, we want to see how can we kind of make changes to how we spend the 2.6 billion in the general funds to better compensate our teachers. And that's an area that I would look at. And I also want to see how we can provide more to address mental health issues and how we can even, advocate in Tallahassee to provide more funding for mental health.
Yeah, it's really important. Okay, so I want to talk about bond money, since that's a big hot topic.
Right.
And so 5 years ago, the voters did approve this $800 million bond referendum to repair all the schools in Broward, at least the ones that needed it. Only 7 so far, I believe, of the 234 are complete and 55 are under construction. And many of those projects have costs increased in the millions. Government is always very slow. And of course, it's easy to make campaign promises. So I have a couple of questions about this. How do you feel about how slow this process has been with this current school board?
Right.
Then how do you think, if you were elected, what would you do when you get in there to make sure that this ball keeps rolling? Because we have kids in moldy classrooms, with asbestos. Like, how do we get this going so these schools can start getting repaired?
Right. There's a lot into that question. And I'd first like to start out by elaborating a little bit on how the bond actually came about and so on. Now, the bond, which is called a SMART bond, right? It basically is called a SMART bond because the money is being used for several things. So, for example, and what the acronyms mean simply is S is for safety, right? So we've done a lot with safety. The school district rather has done a lot with safety and has completed a lot of what they said they were going to do as far as the safety aspect of the bond money. Now, and I'd also like to clarify to those who are listening, this particular pot of money cannot be used for teacher compensation or anything like that because there are different buckets. This is in the capital project bucket. You have the general funds, which is used for teachers. So you can't transfer money from one place to the next. It has to be used for what it's allocated for. So the second part of the bond is music and the arts. And we have done a lot with that as well. I believe that part of the SMART program is completed or almost completed. And then you also have athletics, which is also pretty much, as far as when I investigated, is also completed. I think the last time it was 29 out of 30 different facilities that were upgraded. And then you have the renovation part of the bond, which is what we are talking about, where it is a bit slow. And then the last part is technology. So when you look at it in its entirety, the SMART bond projects are pretty much completed except for the renovation aspect of it. Now, right, so there are several reasons that I've spoken to several people in the district, and there's several reasons for the delay. Nevertheless, I believe that it should be expedited. There should be a way to expedite this process. You know, unfortunately, when we take on certain positions, we may have really strong expertise in one area, and we rely on other people for their expertise in another area. So I think our superintendent has done a wonderful job in the other areas of the SMART bond and in terms of the academic learning outcome. But sometimes as a leader, you rely on areas that you may not necessarily be an expert in, on the expertise of others. And I think he diligently tried to do that as well. So this is what I've discovered. When we did the needs assessment initially, a needs assessment, as far as I'm told, a comprehensive needs assessment normally takes about 2 years to determine exactly how much money you're going to need and so on and so forth. We did sort of a rush job with the needs assessment because rightfully so, the schools needed to be repaired and we could not wait 2 or 3 years to get a needs assessment done. So when it was completed, we found out that it's going to cost more than we had thought in terms of the repairs, the renovations. Renovations are also different from building a brand new building. It comes with a lot more red tape. It comes with a lot more approval and so on and so forth. Initially too, there was also delays with what we call code of silence, where, you know, when something is out for competitive bidding, you're not supposed to be discussing it until the bidding process is over. So that has been breached, has been violated, and they had to start the bidding all over again in the initial phase of this thing.
Were they helping people that they knew? Like, were they giving construction companies they knew, or like a leg up?
Well, I don't know details of it is. I just heard from my investigation, it could have been unintentional, but you know, procedures must be followed, and they discovered that they weren't quite followed as they should have been. And so we had to start the process over, and that cost us some time as well. But to make a long story short, I think that yes, there were some flaws with the needs assessment. Probably with the construction company here, there were the management company rather, there were some issues there as well. And overall, everything had created compounding delays. With that being said, I think the superintendent and his team are really diligently trying to move this forward, and I think that they will. I think our schools will get repaired. The delays are creating some concerns for all of us.
Yeah.
But I think that in the end, it will all be done. And unfortunately, we had some factors that were outside of the district's ability to determine because of relying on certain other companies that they hire to do needs assessment and so on. But in the end, I think we all want the same outcome. We want to see our schools repaired. We want this to be expedited. I will be a strong advocate, a strong person, speaking with our superintendent and those involved to see how we can really move this forward, how we can, especially for the schools that are really in need. But with that being said, though, it's important to note that I think it's over 70 schools, Hillary, that are actually, yeah, it's over 70 schools that are being worked on right as we speak. And, you know, I would encourage our listeners to please go on the Broward County Schools website and look at the bond. I think there is a page for how the bond projects are coming along. And I've looked at it recently, and they're doing some wonderful things. There's over 70 schools right now being worked on. We also must remember, you're talking about massive renovations. Sometimes construction companies are not readily available to be able to get to every single school simultaneously. So I think we have to be patient as well, but we also have to put a little nudge to get them to kind of speed this process up. And I will work to make sure that it is done because it is in the interest of our students that they have safe learning environments.
agree with you. I think that it's if it's up to 70 schools, that's great. But if it gets to the point where schools have mold and all of that, like that should never happen. Like that shouldn't be something that should be repaired. Like it should have never existed, right? Like it shouldn't get that far before they're it, right?
Well, I would say that even before the money was approved, we had concerns with schools that were urgent, and as a result, I think that was one of the reasons we went out to try to speed the needs assessment process up so we can get some money to start working on these very urgent concerns.
Yeah.
You know, but we have a huge district. We have schools, you know, that we haven't had the money in the past to provide repairs for these schools, and we were able to fortunately get the voters to approve the smart bond.
Yeah.
So what I would say is we are all on the same page. We all want this to be done. But sometimes when you're not there and you're not working within the capacity of the district and the superintendent, sometimes you don't really see all the things that can delay a project.
Mm.
But I think we all want to see that this is taken care of and that it's expedited. I don't think any of us want to have schools that have serious conditions continue to exist. So I am going to, as far as my role in the process, I am going to do whatever I can to you know, to ensure that our district, our superintendent, and those involved, our facilities department is working in the most efficient way to expedite the process.
Great. Okay. So school safety, the Guardian program, which was passed in 2018 in Tallahassee, and then in 2019, these legislators snuck in that teachers could be armed, which is exactly the opposite of what the kids from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas wanted and March for Our Lives. So that's now something that exists. So I had a couple questions. I mean, it is a reality that school safety is something that we have to be really concerned about. You had touched on mental health earlier. For the students, but so what are some other really realistic things? First, do you agree with the Guardian program as it stands right now, that teachers are okay, it's okay for teachers who choose to be armed? And two, what are some other realistic things that we could do for school safety?
Okay, so what you mentioned, Hillary, was initially, you know, when they came out with, you know, as far as the Guardian program, they didn't include this part about arming teachers, and then later on they kind of snuck that in there, right? I would say this: I am not for arming teachers. I do not support any part of Senate Bill 7030 involving arming our teachers. I think teachers should teach, and we need to get people who are properly trained to be armed to protect our schools. I don't think it's a role that a teacher should have to play, and I don't think any school district should put that on our teachers. So I do not support teachers being armed. I do, however, in the ideal sense of school security, I would much rather see that we have police officers, at least one at every school, but that's not always possible with the budget that we have. So we have part of the program that allows us to have, you know, campus monitors, school security officers, and so on and so forth. It costs less. It doesn't mean they're necessarily less efficient, because it requires that the county sheriff train these individuals for 144 training hours to make sure that they understand how to really secure a school. So it's not necessarily the most ideal situation that we would want. I would prefer to have a police officer there, but I think with the budget and money, you know, just having someone who's properly trained on the campus of a school, I think is important.
Okay, so standardized test. I just want to touch on this a little bit. So there was a study done in 2015 that the Florida Standard Assessment Test found that the test is reliable and accurate to measure whether students mastered a state academic standard, and then they use this data to that it's fairly used for teacher evaluations and to calculate if the school is an A or an F school, right? That we grade these public schools now. And
Right.
I've heard a lot of parents go, oh, no, 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 that's an F school, right?
Right.
So I want to know if you agree with this study, if we should be using this data to evaluate teachers and also to evaluate schools and give them a grade. And then do you agree with this? I mean, parents being able to move their child to whatever school they want to, if they're living in an area where they don't like their school and they can move their child to another school, it's creating what's a new segregation, and a lot of children I feel are being left behind. Do you agree with being able to do that, to move your kid wherever you want in the county?
Okay, so your question is has multiple parts to it.
Yes, sorry. Sorry.
Okay, so let's talk about evaluation of the school and the teachers. Well, I am not a fan of, for example, using performance to determine how much a teacher makes. So I am not a fan of performance-based pay. I believe evaluations have their purposes. I believe there should be some measure of success for student learning outcome. And so, as far as standardized testing, I think using it to determine the learning outcome of students within a school is okay. However, it should not be the only defining factor that determines whether or not a school is successful, whether or not students are successful. That is just one measure of performance. So I don't like how these standardized tests are being used. It's creating a lot of anxiety for our children. When you attach it to teachers' pay, it's creating a lot of anxiety for our teachers. Our teachers are feeling very pressured, and not only pressured because, sometimes it's not necessarily an objective way to evaluate our teachers, because teachers have different types of students, and some students may have greater learning gains than others based upon the students that you get, or based upon their learning challenges and so on and so forth. So I just don't think there's any way to objectively use these standardized tests to determine whether or not a teacher is effective. So as far as I'm concerned, I would prefer not to use them to determine teachers' performance and pay. At the same time, do I support getting rid of them totally? I would say no. I would say they need to be used in addition to multiple other factors to determine our students' learning outcome. And they need not be the major focus of our entire school year. Teachers start in August, focusing on the FSA for the entire school year.
Right.
It really takes the fun out of learning. I think it affects the ability for students to be innovative and creative, because you're always sort of channeled into this one goal of doing on a standardized test. So it leaves very little room to be creative, to be innovative, to kind of explore, the curiosity of the human thought. And so in that sense, I think it affects many other areas of the holistic development of a child. And I think we need to reevaluate how we use it without eliminating it totally.
Okay, I agree. Okay, so what has been the most challenging, important, or exciting moment in your campaign so far?
That's the most challenging. I think right now it's the most challenging. I mean, trying to campaign and being able to go out and meet people, not being able to go door to door. I mean, that's where you really get a feel. And, candidates don't realize campaigning is not really just about you. It's really about the community and getting a feel as to what their needs are. Because sometimes we think we know. And when you actually go out, you realize the voters have different concerns. And when you're talking about a county-wide seat,
oh, I can't imagine.
There are many different concerns. You may have kids living in an economically disadvantaged community, and their concerns might be different from a a kid living in a primarily language barrier, type community where maybe it's mostly Hispanics, and they have to deal with maybe their parents don't speak English properly, and they have to deal with getting their homework done. So there are so many different pockets of concern when you go through the community. There are communities right now, like where my sons are in Parkland, that the concern is really safety and security, and the devastation of that community because of that. So every community has a different concern, and when you take on a countywide seat, you have to be able to have that ability to listen to all the concerns that the community has. And so for me, the challenge is really not getting out there as we should now because of the coronavirus pandemic, to really go to these different areas and see what the needs are and get a better feel as to how we can help those communities. But forums like these and speaking to you is awesome. But that's the greatest challenge. Now, I think you had asked another question about you mentioned what was the second?
Exciting.
Exciting. Well, I have to say one of the exciting moments of my campaign was when I did the Sis Strong Parade. I was that was a wonderful event. I was able to meet so many voters, and people were just having a good time in the streets. And I had the opportunity to really walk down the Sistrunk Boulevard and greet a lot of parents and hear their concerns. So I think that was a pretty exciting moment. Um, I think you had asked about an important moment. Is that what you said, or?
Yep. Important.
I think important moments in my campaign is when I met with our superintendent, and I met with some school board members, and just listening to their perspective as opposed to the voters' perspective, and putting it all into context. I think those are important moments. And sometimes the perspective of the leaders,
Mhm.
um, they are similar to the perspective of the voters, and sometimes they're not necessarily so. So you get to hear both sides, and I think that's really important for me. That's very important for me. But I have to say though that one of the very concerning moments of my campaign um, is is just because I am and I wouldn't say it's a part of campaigning. I would say that my sons attend schools in Parkland, and and I went to the food uh, the food drive support
Mm.
that Parkland held on the 14th. And I am just amazed at the strength of that community, and how we can take a tragedy as human beings and we can turn it into something positive and give back to the community. And they were putting together food items to ship to Haiti, you
Mm.
know, in the midst of their own dealing with their own tragedy. So I think when I went there, that was a really strong moment for me this year, and I'm glad I did. So yeah,
Okay, so 3 fun questions.
yeah.
What is your favorite book?
Oh, geez. Well, I'll tell you, Hillary, I don't read a lot of a lot of fictional books. I tend to read a lot of inspirational books.
Mhm.
I also read a lot of books that are based upon how to really manage your time and yourself. So I tend to read a lot of books from authors like Brian Tracy. He has a wonderful book called Eat That Frog, and which simply means you take care of the things that are really challenging first, and then you deal with the other things that are not so challenging. And but I would say, if I were to, and I like authors like Deepak Chopra, Stephen Covey. Those are really inspirational folks that I look at. But if I were to think of one book that I just remember all my life since I've read it, and I actually read it a couple of times, it's a small book. I think it was written in the 1900s by James Allen that says, "As a Man Thinketh." And I think the basis of that is someone, I think he was a lawyer, and he took some time off to just reflect on life, and he felt that, your thoughts really define who you are, and as a result, if you can control your thoughts and if you can put positive things in your mind, then it's going to show in how you treat others and how you deal with life. So I think that's a really, really that book impressed a lot on my mind, and it's a very small book, and it's called "As a Man Thinketh" by James Allen.
Okay, so if you could travel anywhere in the world, I mean, I'd go down the street at this point. I mean, I would go anywhere right now just to get out of this house. But if you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go?
Well, certainly we can't go anywhere right now, but
No.
I wouldn't go anywhere right now.
Yeah.
But when this is all over,
Yes.
and we can all travel again, and we can all get back to our normal lives, I think one place I would like to visit. I would like to visit Egypt. I think I'd like to visit the pyramids. It's just amazing. I don't think they've ever figured out how they built those. The engineering that went into that, considering how long ago that was. And I was just always impressed from when I was learning as a student to when I explore that later on. So I think I'd like to visit Egypt to see, among many other places. But
Yeah,
yeah.
that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, who or what is inspiring you right now?
Well, what I would say is what has inspired me all my life, and this is, I grew up in a large family. I had 7 siblings. I had 2 brothers and 4 sisters. My brothers went off to boarding school. They stayed on campus. So I grew up mostly with women. And the most inspirational person throughout my life is my mother. And she has continued to be. She is a pillar of strength. And throughout my years uh, being in Broward County, she has supported me. I can always call and she'll give a listening ear, and she always has the right direction. So I would say yes. But in addition to that, though, equally important, my 2 sons, I would say, are currently the ones inspiring me now. My mom is a lifetime inspiring person, but my 2 sons, because when I look at them, they have, children are so innocent. They don't carry certain things that in their thoughts and mind that adults would normally carry. They don't seek to compete with each other. They just appreciate each other. And so with my 2 sons, I can see the future of this country. I can see the future of this county. And I'm hoping as a father, I can instill within them the drive to succeed and to be the best they can be in life, and to understand, as Mahatma Gandhi once said, to live their life really in the service of others, because that's where you'll find true joy. I think true joy comes from that, in terms of you do receive satisfaction from giving, as opposed to living life just thinking about yourself. So yeah, they're my 2 boys are my inspiration. I love being around them every minute I can get.
Oh, that's beautiful. How old are they?
Well, the younger one, he's 9 years old, and he loves to play chess.
Ooh.
He's a chess guy. And goes to Heron Heights, and the older one is 13, and he goes to West Glades. So they both have their own unique qualities and strength. And I hope that I am being a role model for them as well.
13. So my daughter's entering the teen year, so we're getting a glimpse of like what that's going to be like. And it's been so much fun being home for quarantine.
I heard it's different for girls versus boys. I don't know how true
Well,
that is.
yeah. Well, we'll see. My son's coming up right behind her, so I'll let you know which one is worse. But thank you so much for being here. It was so nice talking to you, and I wish you so much luck. Thank you for running. I love seeing great people run for office, so I really appreciate all the work you're doing. I know this is a hard time for even our organization. All these plans we had for 2020 are like falling apart, and it stinks. We had all these plans to register voters and help candidates, and it's just like we're trying to rethink new innovative ways to do that, right?
Yes, exactly. Well, I just like to say, Hillary, that even though it is challenging times for all of us, we are one county, we are one country. We're going to get through this. We just have to have a united spirit. We are climbing, as the way I see it, we're climbing a pretty steep mountain right now with what is happening in our country, with our parents having to work from home, some of them losing their jobs, having to have children with schoolwork in the homes while they're working. I mean, we are going through a lot, and as a result, I think we should hold hands together and understand that we are in this together. And when we get on the other side of this mountain, we are going to be strengthened, and we are not going to be weakened by anything. And we've always proven as a nation to be strong. We've overcome many things. We've overcome the civil disputes in the 60s. We overcome slavery. We will overcome this too. So I think we're a great nation, and I know we're going to be fine. It will pass, but be strong and continue to be tolerant of each other, because we now have to stay in the same home much longer than we normally do, right?
Ah, yeah. There's little tears in my eyes all 24 hours a day. But we'll get through it. So thank you again. I want to give a quick promotion. Do you want to shout out your website where people can find you?
Yes. Please take the time out, because I just can't say enough on an interview, for you to get to know me even more. So I'm encouraging you to go to jeffholness.com. It's very simple, my name.com. There's a lot of information about me, about my background, about my school leadership, my community service, my business ownership, and a little bit about my personal background as well, and about my platform. So go to jeffholness.com and be sure to check out as much as you can, and then make that informed decision to choose the best candidate to move our district forward countywide.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to give a quick promotion. So next Thursday, April 23rd at 6 p.m., we're going to be doing a Zoom, and I'm going to figure out how to use this thing good. This is our first Zoom, so I'm like still figuring it out, but I think it went really well. I think we did all right, right?
Awesome. You did an awesome job. And by the way, Hillary, I told you before I came on, but I love the hair.
Yes, this was a COVID decision. I thought maybe if I changed my hair, I could disappear, but that didn't okay, so our next conversation is next Thursday, April 23rd. We are going to have a live conversation with Representative Chevron Jones, who I'm a huge fan of. I'm going to fangirl out next Thursday beyond. He's running for Florida Senate District 35. So I'm really excited that Representative Jones is going to be here. So make sure you come back Thursday, April 23rd at 6 p.m. to listen to our conversation with Representative Jones. Thank you again so much.
Thank you so much, Hillary.
All right, have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.